Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ. Welcome to today's webinar. This is part 2 of a series that started, was last May, just last month, actually, on protecting your end users from outages. And so today we're going to talk about local host cache and how that can help you out. But before I get into that, I do want to mention that next week is our CUGC XL event in New York City. I'll be there. It's next Wednesday. I hope you can come out. If you're in the area, we'd love to have you. It's a free full day event. We've got a lot of great Citrix content lined up for the day. We've even got Calvin Sue going to give us a big Citrix update. That's going to be awesome. And Jarian Gibson and Carl Webster, this is his last presentation of his Active Directory Masterclass. So that's very exciting too. And then right behind that, we have the first ever CUGC XL in India, in Bengaluru. That's on June 28th. I can give you all the links for that in just a bit. I'll throw those in the chat so you can find those in our events calendar. But and we definitely have more XLs and Exchange events planned throughout the rest of the year. So take a look at those. Before we get going, we are recording today's session and you will receive a link to that recording in email. I'll also provide a link to the previous webinar so you can catch up. If you have questions, we hope that you'll type them in as you have them. We'll get to as many as we can today, but there's a Q&A panel where you can put your questions in. And then there's also a chat panel where you can say hello, tell us where you're joining from, and talk to the other attendees. So definitely use both of those. And all right, I'm going to turn things over in just a bit. I've got Isaac Stasevich and Nitin Mehta from Citrix Cloud Software Group here with us today to talk about local host cache. Hello, Nitin and Isaac.
How's it going?
Good, good. And we also have with us Chris Zukin. He is in the Netherlands with our Dutch CUGC group. He is a Citrix technology advocate. Hello, Chris. He's going to help us with the questions. So thank you, Chris.
Good afternoon.
Is it evening for you already?
Yes, it's evening.
Well, thank you for being here at the end of your day. All right, Isaac and Nitin, I'm going to hand things over to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you're free to take it away.
All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, yeah. So just so you guys know, my big slides are up here. Most of the time I'll be reading here, but if I look that way, I'm just looking at my slides. Hello, everyone. My name is Isaac Stasevich. This is part 2 of our resiliency series. Hope you joined us for the last one, which was part 1, was talking a little bit about service continuity. Now we're moving into localhost cache. So I'm a senior product manager here at Citrix, and I focus on all things resiliency. So that's localhost cache, service continuity, and all things cloud uptime. So joining me today, we have Nitin. Nitin, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Isaac. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Hope you guys are a vocal group, so would love to have you participate in Q&A. My name is Nitin, and I work as a product manager for Broker. I was handling the reins of localhost cache and auto config and auto scale before I handed some of it to Isaac and some of it to my other counterpart, but pretty much everything Broker is under my, it's something that I handle. So happy to see you guys and very excited to speak here at CUGC.
Awesome. And Chris is our moderator. Chris, do you want to give yourself a quick self-introduction as well?
Yes, of course. Well, I'm a CTA from the Netherlands, and well, I'm working with Citrix daily. So the local host cache is part of my job, really. So I'm curious if there are any improvements in it.
Awesome. And that brings up a great point. On top of questions that you may have, any technical questions, we want to know how to make this product better. So we're really looking forward to hearing any feedback that you as a group has and how we can improve the product and what we can do to enable users to keep launching during any service disruptions. So we will go ahead and hop right in. So we already introduced ourselves, but I do want to take a second to leave this page up for both myself and Nitin's email addresses. We are open to all feedback and any questions that you may have. Please do feel free to reach out to us at any time at the email addresses on screen, and I'm sure Stephanie will have those sent out as well at the end. So looking into the agenda, we're going to start with why use localhost cache? What makes it so important? Why is it such a pivotal aspect of our product? And then get into the technical details of how it works. Then move into not only how it works, but how we should configure it and leading practices. And this is going to be a really important part here because we see most of the issues that people have are with misconfiguration. So we'll talk about some of those common misconfigurations to make sure that you have it set up correct. Then we'll look into some LHC considerations. LHC is localhost cache. So what limitations there may be, what things to consider when if your environment goes down, what will and won't be available. And last, we'll talk about how to actually test this, how to make sure this is working, how to see if there is an outage that your users will continue to be able to access. And last, we'll take some time for feedback. I do want to encourage everyone to ask questions throughout. We'll be taking some pauses, and Chris and Nitin will help get those questions going. And on top of the questions, we want to hear, like I mentioned earlier, how we can make this product better. If there's any challenges that you're facing, what we can do to help fix those. So to start off, why should I be using localhost cache? When it comes to IT, outages are just inevitable. I would imagine everyone on this call has experienced some type of outage in some way, shape, or form throughout their career. So because of this, organizations are moving more and more towards these design for failure approaches. So if there is some type of service disruption, how can we continue to work? And that is what localhost cache is. It's almost like an insurance policy that's going to enable users to continue working during those outages. So I'll pause here. Do we have, everything's been pretty high level so far, but any questions in the chat so far?
There's a question by Jim. It would be interesting to be able to see the real-time LHC status before testing or needing to do a rebuild.
Yeah, great question. Jim, did we have a conversation a couple of weeks ago? I think we might have. So there are some events that we could track in our connectors and in our delivery controllers that will monitor the status of the sync of the primary database to the backup database. So we do have some things in place, and we're also looking to improve those. So monitoring those event logs is the current way to check if things are syncing correctly and that database is up to date. So what is localhost cache? Localhost cache is kind of in the name. It's a cache that is hosted locally of the database that we need to enable users to connect to their resources during an outage. So that database is synced, I guess is the right word for it, synced from the primary database at regular intervals. And can overcome the following outage scenarios. So that's if your delivery controllers are having issues communicating with the SQL database, that could be a network connectivity issue or some type of outage in your SQL database. Or if your cloud connectors are having issues communicating with the broker service in Citrix Cloud. So what exactly is on that localhost cache database is a ton of information that we need to continue brokering those sessions. That's going to be the identity of the users and groups that have resources assigned to them. It's going to have session information, so up-to-date session information from both sessions that started before the outage and during that outage. It's going to have the identities of the virtual delivery agents that your users are actually connecting to. Any actively connected client machines, it's going to have information about those as well. Any EPA scans that you're running in your environment through a NetScaler gateway, it's going to have that kind of information. It's going to have identities of the NetScaler gateway in the storefront, and then a log of recent user activity. And by default, that sync period between your backup locally cached database and that primary database is going to happen every 10 minutes. but that is configurable. It can be longer intervals or shorter intervals, as your organization sees fit. So what actually happens when localhost cache becomes active is that there's going to be what we call an election process, where one of the delivery controllers or cloud connectors per zone is going to become the primary broker. And when that happens, all of the VDAs that you have in your environment are going to have to re-register with that primary broker. So there is a time interval in which an outage is detected and your users are able to launch. That's during that there's kind of two phases on that, and we'll look at the life cycle as well, but there's something we call pending HA, where the outage is first noticed. We have an interval that we set at that time. So once that communication is broken, we'll continue to monitor for a period of time, and then we'll switch into all of our VDAs re-registering with that secondary broker. So there may be a slight blip of time when your users can't access. So that single DDC or cloud connector, that single broker that becomes elected, is going to be completely responsible for all brokering activities within the environment. So we have multiple services on that broker, and that primary broker service that is responsible for brokering connections during healthy operations is going to continue to monitor the health of the database, while the secondary broker service or the high availability service on our cloud connector or delivery controller is going to be the one responsible for actually doing the brokering until normal operations resume. So we'll move into how to configure, and then kind of later we're going to go into like how this works. We have a few diagrams that we can take a look at, but I'll take another pause here to see if there's any questions that have come up in the chat.
Yeah, so there is a question from Corey. It says in Citrix DAS environment, the documentation states that LHC engages when the network connection is lost for 60 seconds. Is there any way to customize this setting? For example, change it to 2 minutes?
I have to double check. Nitin, do you know that one off the top of your head?
I mean, I don't think you can change it at the moment, but I would love to understand, Corey, if you could just type it again. Why would you want to change it to 2 minutes? Is it because of flapping or network being unstable? Just would love to understand. There has been a lot of fine tuning that we did, and that's why we kind of came out to 60 seconds. We have extensive, research that we did. So, okay, so Corey replied, she says unstable network. Yeah, we'll take that as feedback. I mean, would go back to my engineering team and see if we can customize this and present it to the customers. My only concern with all these settings is like, we want to make sure that customers are extremely savvy of what they're doing so that they don't shoot themselves in the foot and cause more pain than desired. So yeah.
Right, because that interval will be a time where your users are unable to connect completely. So, so making that interval longer could have a negative impact on our end users.
Correct. Yeah, there is another question by Matt. We have a regular issue with VDAs re-registering. Would enabling the LHC on the DDCs help with that?
When you say enabling LHC through the DDCs, are you talking about the registry key?
I guess so. I guess that's what is Matt referring to. So basically, I think the question is that would enabling LHC help in the re-registration process of VDAs?
Off the top of my head, I can't see why that would help. That's definitely an issue. I would definitely recommend opening a support case on that one to see if we could get to the bottom of why that re-registration, right? Instead of like finding a workaround, we need to figure out what the issue is. So
yeah, I think same here. I would say like basically this might be putting a band-aid on something. We might have to debug as to what's going on. LHC could eliminate maybe the networking side of it, assuming that you are on DAS. So it could eliminate that it flowing through the internet, and so you might be able to narrow it down, but still that might still be a band-aid kind of a solution still. So yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Does the VDA need to be restarted to re-register with CC? When during LHC, I think the question is, does the VDA need to be restarted to re-register with Citrix connector? And the answer is no. VDA needs, you don't have to do anything. It will take care of re-registering the VDA with Citrix connector. So there is code on the on both the connector and the VDA side to establish that relationship again.
Yeah.
Does remote desktop have something similar to LHC, or is that one way Citrix is better?
Like just RDPing directly to a server. So with RDP, you have to know I'm not overly familiar with it, but my understanding of RDP is you have to know the IP address of the server and you're just connecting to it directly. So one, I think, big advantage of Citrix is the idea of load balancing across different hosts. And then, yeah, like our resiliency solutions are a big differentiator with our competitors. Absolutely. All right.
Yeah, we can move forward, I think.
So let's talk about enabling localhost cache in the first place. So if your site was built on 7.16 LTSR or later, it should be on by default. You can double check this by running get broker site and looking at the localhost cache enabled parameter. We want that set to true. So if you do need to change that, we could just run a quick set broker site and set that parameter to true. For DAS environments, localhost cache is always on. You actually can't turn it off. And in our cloud connectors and our delivery controllers, a SQL Server Express local database is automatically installed. So you have that local database there, by default, you're ready to go for localhost cache. I do want to, just emphasize this slide quite a bit. So we're going to talk about configuring localhost cache and making sure you're available. This is one of the most important slides I would say that we're going to talk about here, because from our support cases, from our failed launches, this is what we see being the main issues with people and localhost cache. So our delivery controllers and cloud connectors should be sized at the very least 4 vCPU and 6 gigs of RAM. And vCPUs should be configured to come from a single socket. This is really important because when localhost cache kicks in, that localhost cache database is constrained to using CPUs from a single socket. So if you have 4 vCPUs across 4 sockets, when localhost cache kicks in, you are really only using 1 vCPU. So that single socket is something that's missed quite often, but extremely important for the performance of the environment during localhost cache. In terms of storage, that local database can grow up to 3 megabytes per second. So make sure that you have enough storage on your cloud connectors or delivery controllers to accommodate that. Another common parameter that we see missed is the reuse machines without shutdown and outage allowed. So for a lot of MCS shops or PVS shops that are doing non-persistent workloads, when the VDA reboots in localhost cache, you actually won't have access to those resources unless you set this parameter. This is because power management is not available during localhost cache. So with this parameter, what we're saying is if localhost cache kicks in, we are allowing multiple users to use this virtual desktop or virtual app without the machine actually rebooting. Some people call it like dirty desktops. And this will only do the dirty desktops if there is an outage. So definitely important to keeping access to those pooled resources during outages. On the storefront side of things, if you're doing DAS as of 1912 LTSR CU1 and later, we have something called advanced health checks, which allows us to put all of our cloud connectors in a single not list of DDCs, but a single delivery controller within the storefront servers. It's definitely recommended that you go through and enable that advanced health check. And we're looking at getting that as the default setting moving forward, coming up in the product. Also important for normal operations, but just as important for localhost cache, is that you should have all of your brokers listed as STAs, and the STAs have to match what is listed on the gateways. So last, with load balancing, there on the NetScaler, there's an XD DDC mon for monitoring the health of your brokers. So this monitor actually monitors the health of the broker's ability to actually broker a session and enumerate applications. If you're using just a regular TCP monitor and localhost cache kicks in, you will have failed launches. This is because your delivery controller, if it's not the one that's elected as the primary broker, it's not going to be brokering any sessions, but if a TCP monitor will still see that broker is up. So having a good monitoring solution that monitors not only the up or down of the delivery controller, or cloud connector, but the ability to enumerate applications is extremely important for localhost cache to work correctly. I'm going to pause here because I feel this slide is super important. Any questions on configuring localhost cache or any of these statements that we have on this slide?
I think one of the question is, so if you don't from Matt, so if you don't configure the reuse machines setting, it won't work.
Nitin, correct me if I'm wrong here. You will be able to launch one session, and then after that first session, they'll no longer be available. Is that right?
Correct. So basically, the case is that your capacity becomes limited. What we are trying to say with this setting is for pooled machines, if you have this flag on reuse machines without shutdown, that means the second user who gets that pooled machine won't get a fresh copy of the desktop. So understandably, there could be a security risk, which some of the healthcares or some of these security sensitive customers are don't want to do. But then a lot of customers do use this setting as well because it's an outage mode. So you want users to be functional, so you're fine with that kind of a risk. It's not super sensitive data per se for some of the customers. So yeah, it's not that it won't be available, it's just that the capacity becomes limited.
Right. So users will be able to launch it the first time, and then when the power action is supposed to happen, where it reboots, it won't happen because we don't have power management in LHC, and it won't be available after.
Correct. And I think, sorry, Randall is asking, how do you enable advanced health checks?
So there's some documentation on that. It's kind of hidden in the files of the storefront server. Nitin, do you think you can provide that documentation in the chat?
Yep, I'll do that.
Thank you. Yeah, and while Nitin's getting that together, I did want to just mention this, like the security concern of the reused machines without shutdown, is that previous user data may still be on the pooled desktop when the next user logs in. So if that's a concern, then you may not want to enable that feature. All right.
So I think
can I add one more thing?
Yes, Chris.
This of course only is if you use machine creation services. If you use provisioning services, this wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, fair point. One thing to note is that power management is not available during LHC mode. And so that's why we are asking to, consider using this flag because there will not be any power management available because the broker is on the connector or it's a secondary broker. So it doesn't have all the goodness of what you have in the primary broker. And it's a disruption mode. It's an outage mode. So yeah.
But even with PVS, we won't be able to reboot those target devices. So
Exactly. So power management is not available. So yeah, even for PBS, you won't be able to reboot the machines.
All right.
There are some more questions coming in. Can the reuse machine setting be set at any time without problems, or should it be done during a maintenance window? I mean, so this setting is specifically for LHC mode, so you can set it up during any time. And this setting kicks in only during LHC mode, so it's very specific and geared towards LHC only. So you can set it anytime. Sorry, I read.
No, I was gonna say I would recommend doing any change during a maintenance window, but Nitin is correct. It shouldn't impact anything when you make that change. One other thing to note on that reuse machines without shutdown and outage, we actually have to set it in two places. So one is at the site level. I think that's, yeah, the one that's out there is at the site level, reuse machines without shutdown and outage allowed. And then on each individual delivery group that you want to enable that for, you also need to set it. And that is the same thing, reuse machines without shutdown and outage without the word allowed. And I go into, I think I have it written down on another slide there, so you'll be able to see it. All right,
Okay.
we'll keep on chugging along. So now the fun part with the diagrams is how localhost cache actually works. So starting with healthy operations, in this we'll be able to see, let's see, I'm gonna bring my mouse over here, that the principal broker is gonna be talking to the site database here, and that is gonna be responsible for brokering the sessions. And during that, we see this CSS service and the high availability service. They are going to be syncing that site database to the localhost cache database. So the config sync service checks with the broker at about every minute to see if any changes were made to that site database. And if there were changes, we'll get a new copy of that database down to the localhost cache database. If there's no changes, then nothing is copied. And all configuration data is copied. It's not just what is changed. So yeah, that's pretty much how it works. And you'll see that the VDAs in this case are also registering with the principal broker in this case. All right. So when localhost cache kicks in, at this point, the secondary broker or the high availability service is going to be what's processing requests from the, for the environment. So when that outage begins, we talked about the BDAs, you'll see that they are no longer registering with the principal broker. They're registering with this high availability service. And this principal broker up here is going to be responsible for monitoring the health of the site database. And then the secondary broker there is going to be responsible for all brokering processes. It's important to note, just to kind of reiterate, that only a single delivery controller or cloud connector is going to be doing the brokering. The one that is elected is going to be the one that's handling all of the connections at this time. So this is the the life cycle of localhost cache, which I mentioned earlier, where we'll be able to see kind of what this process looks like. So you're in normal operations, and then some type of service disruption is noticed, and we move into that pending HA mode, the one that somebody mentioned, if they want to extend that if they can. So we're going to take a look into that. But pending HA mode is for 60 seconds. Every 5 seconds, it's going to check whether or not the service is back up and running. This is to eliminate any false positives, so we're not failing over to localhost cache if there's actually not an outage and it was just a small blip. So after that minute happens, the delivery controllers decide we are going into localhost cache mode. They are going to elect a primary broker, and we're going to move into initial HA. And at this point, the HA service takes over the brokering, that secondary brokering service. And our VDAs are going to trigger that re-registration process where we're going to start re-registering with that secondary broker. Once that's done, we're going to move into extended HA, where at this point, we are going to be brokering all sessions through the cloud connectors and delivery controllers. And every 20 seconds, we are going to check the health of that primary broker of that database to see if we can reach it. Once we have established that connection to either the SQL server or the broker service in cloud, we're going to move into pending recovery. I do want to emphasize here that the pending recovery is for 10 minutes. We did this pending recovery at 10 minutes to reduce what we call flapping, where it says we're healthy and then we go offline, and then we're healthy and we go offline. So we need to have 10 full minutes of successful, healthy health checks before we go back into the working normally mode, where our config sync service is replicating configurations back down to the localhost cache database again. So I'll pause here before we kind of get into how we can monitor this whole process to see if there's any questions.
So I think question from Joel is, what will happen to the data in database after the recovery? Does it flush out?
It's a good question. We're actually working on integrating that data into Director and improving like what that information, like the accessibility of that information after an outage is complete. Nitin, do you have some more information on what happens to that data after?
Yeah, I mean, so basically this when the normal operations resume, we start having the sync again between the primary broker in the DAS world and the Citrix connector, right? So that database is refreshed with the new data that is there in the source of truth, which is DAS, or in on-prem case, what's there in the SQL database. So it doesn't get flushed out, but it gets refreshed. And what we also do, I think what Isaac is talking about, is once that an outage is over, we are thinking of integrating with, let's say, Director and show you the information on like what happened, how long was the outage, how many VDAs were registered, and how many sessions were brokered, and so on. So we are thinking about that. So we are evaluating that, but that's what happens to the data. Next question from Matt. We are currently active with about 6,500 users, probably 750 VDAs. Okay, there's no question though.
Maybe check the Q&A screen also.
Oh, Q&A is also coming up. Okay. Is there a list of event log entries that are generated during the LHC lifecycle stages? From Greg.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we do have that in the in our edocs. I also have that here, and we'll talk a little bit in deeper. I just want to make sure you guys can see. We do have events that show where we are in the LHC process.
Another question is, where can we see the status of LHC if it's in use? Meaning pending HA, initial HA, extended HA, and pending recovery in the console. It would be nice to see what's going on when LHC is actively working.
So we're improving the reporting of localhost cache inside the event viewer. But that would be the place to monitor, because Studio or Director may not be available when an outage occurs.
Correct. So I mean, yeah, I mean it's mostly in the event logs on the connector, or in the case of CVAD on-prem, it will be in the DDC event logs, which is the elected broker. So you will see there all these events that Isaac is showing on his slide. I mean, and some of these aspects are slightly abstracted out just to keep it very simple and easy to consume. Ultimately, you want to understand that you are in LHC mode and what's going on. We are also we are planning to enhance some of these event logs to give you the status of LHC when LHC is actually operational. So just to kind of give you the lay of the land in terms of what is the overall status of your environment, what did the LHC do in the last few minutes, and how long the duration of LHC has been so far. So we are planning to again evaluating. I can't give you timelines because this is not an NDA event. But again, we are actively evaluating. That is all I can say.
All right, so we'll hop in here and then probably try to finish this one out and then get into feedback and questions and ideas for improving the product. But looking at the event logs, I think that was a great question. Like, how do we know what's going on with localhost cache? Event viewer is going to be, it's going to be our main source of truth for the matter, because Studio and Director may not be available. So in this, we can see when the sync is happening and also if the actual config sync is failing. If you see any of these events on your delivery controller or cloud connector, I would definitely recommend looking into it further to see if they're, to see what the problem is and make sure that you're available during localhost cache. This 507, so if you're in the middle of a config sync and localhost cache is triggered, it's gonna scrap the config sync that was currently in process and go to the last healthy config sync. So that's just one note there. And then as to when this actually starts and which one the elected broker is, there's also these events that we can monitor. So when an outage occurred, when we're back to normal, and which one of our brokers is elected.
Yeah, I think just your previous slide, Isaac, I think there were questions based on the LHC flow diagram. Is that a 6-minute expectation for LHC activation to complete, meaning 60 seconds plus 5 minutes? I think the flow diagram.
Yeah, so the 60 seconds will be downtime. This we are looking, we're monitoring the health. We're making sure we're not going into localhost cache if it's just a blip. This initial HA is not necessarily an outage, but it's possible. So this is the time where our VDAs are re-registering with that secondary broker service. If there's a VDA that is available and registered, your user will be able to launch. So it really just depends on in your environment, the time it takes for those VDAs to re-register. What we're saying by this 5 minutes is that we are not doing another health check with the primary database until 5 minutes is up. We want to make sure we are completely in localhost cache mode and launching correctly between localhost cache before we go back to monitoring the health of the primary database and working completely. So to answer your question, no, it's not 6 minutes of downtime. It's 60 seconds plus however long it takes for the VDAs to register here. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. I think another question is, are all slides available after the webinar?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I think one more question is there an alert that can be configured when LHC has kicked in, or do you have to have other monitoring tools in place to check on your SQL components, etc.?
It's a good question. So the problem is we don't know exactly what is down when localhost cache kicks in. There could be quite a few things, and that could impact it could impact Director, it could impact Studio. There's a lot of things that could be impacted there. So no, there's not an alert outside of our event viewer. You would need a third party to monitor the event viewer and track the health of the environment through there.
Right. So I mean, I think our recommendation is for you guys to monitor the event viewer and all the event IDs that he was showing, that as I was showing in the next couple of slides, like especially the starred ones. So just keep a watch on them to really understand whether you are in outage mode or not. Now, what caused that outage? Is it the network? Is it Citrix Cloud going down? Is it something else at your end? Is something that, it's very difficult to determine and needs debugging. But yes, I mean, I think I would highly recommend you guys to monitor these event IDs, because this is like a primary indicator of whether you are in outage or not, and whether and even during normal operations, are things, is the information syncing fine between the primary broker and the secondary broker, so that when outage does happen, LHC is in good health to take over, and you having no end user disruption whatsoever. Yep, those are the questions so far.
All right, so let's move into some of the considerations and potential limitations of localhost cache. So some of the big ones here are that, it's been said a few times that Studio and Director may be unavailable, as well as power management not being available. And we can see the kind of star on the bottom is that, even if power management is unavailable, if you want to use those pooled desktops more than one time, we can do that with reused machines shutdown and outage allowed, and reuse machines without shutdown and outage. And just mentioning that is both at the site level and the delivery group level. So another big one here is that zones and resources are isolated. So each controller is going to have its own cached copy of the localhost cache database. And once localhost cache kicks in, every zone is going to, or zone or resource location is going to operate as its own kind of independent site. So if we're doing things cross zone, something like if we have tags that cross zones, we may have intermittent launch failures, and zone preference is not going to be considered during launches. So kind of just to reiterate that, only the VDAs in the zone where the broker is will be able to launch at that point. And last, there's limited PowerShell SDK access. So we actually can run some of the get broker star commandlets on the local database. So any get broker commandlet that you want to run on the local database can be done. This helped me the other day. I was trying to demo something with localhost cache, and I wasn't able to launch. So I was able to see that it was a problem with registration. So I think this is a powerful tool that not a lot of people know about, that we do have access to the, the broker commandlets on the local database. And it's in the documentation as to how to actually run that. All right. And last but not least, quick slide on how to actually test this. First is, review the event logs, just to make sure, things are going healthy. Apologies for the typo there. But yeah, just monitor the progress of the config sync service to make sure you have a healthy localhost cache database. And then if you want to simulate an outage, this was something somebody asked in the beginning, we can set a registry key, which will force localhost cache mode. I've seen some people do this if they're having intermittent network connectivity issues, just force their whole environment into localhost cache. And also this is really valuable for testing purposes. As we kind of went through that life cycle, we did see that there will be some downtime when localhost cache kicks in. So please do be mindful that if you are simulating an outage, this should be done on a test environment or during very low impact windows or maintenance windows. And once we do that, we can monitor the high availability service log files in that directory down there.
Yeah, and as part of your disaster recovery preparedness, we do recommend you to test LHC every so often, so that you are confident then that when outage does occur, you have everything configured right. Your connectors or your DDCs are configured in the right size, the number of VDAs and advanced health checks and all those things are configured right for when the outage really happens. So we highly recommend you guys to test it out again, of course, either on test environments or during like really low impact windows, so that you don't have any disruption whatsoever. But I highly recommend you guys to test this out.
All right, so I'm going to close up with that. We do have some time. Let's go ahead and answer any questions that haven't been answered yet. And I'm also super interested in hearing, please, if you have any feedback on localhost cache and how we can improve, now is the time to say it. Definitely open and interested. We want this to be, this is a huge part of our product in terms of keeping our customers launching their apps and desktops. Resiliency is, top of mind for everybody, and this is the solution to keep your environment as resilient as possible. So we want to make this as great of a possible product as we can, and we're looking forward to hearing your feedback. I'm gonna go back through the chat for now. Nitin and Chris, if you guys have any further questions that you guys have found,
Yeah,
do let me know.
yeah. So there's one question. So I think there's been conversation going on about whether you should beef up your DDC or you should add more DDC for LHC to perform better.
So remember, when LHC kicks in, we're limited to a single broker. So beefing up the DDC for performance is going to be more impactful than scaling out.
Yes, that's what I also answered. Has there been any changes to LHC since 7.16 when it came out till 1912?
Then you were managing the product at that time.
Yeah, so I would say like there have been we have baked LHC quite a bit. So I can't speak for all the bug fixes and all the improvements that we did since 1912, like happened like a couple of years back, or even more than that, actually, I would say. But please be on the lookout for this year. We are really, really focused on improving LHC. And that's why we were asking for feedback as well. Please expect a few improvements to come in LHC, both within Studio, even in the event logs and so on. So please be on the watch for things on LHC, what we're doing. Yeah. So, but I would always recommend you to kind of come to, get to 2203 version if you're on the on-prem, so that you get the best of all the fixes in LHC and all the improvements.
I also see Jim asked where we're located. Nitin and I are both in the Fort Lauderdale office at the headquarters.
Yeah. From Joel, for Citrix Cloud, would the user be able to establish new connection if the LHC kicks in, or just the existing users that are connected only would be able to continue their current session?
So net new sessions can be handled, no problem at all. Existing sessions won't be impacted at all. So once a session is established, the brokering side of it kind of comes out of the house, and then localhost cache is to broker those new connections when an outage occurs.
So Randall is asking, I always thought that LHC was configured by default and there were no settings needed. If it is not like that, the announcement would be to make it set up by default.
So it's enabled by default. That reuse machine during shutdown and outage mode is a security concern, and Citrix goes by the secure by default. So our defaults are going to be to keep that disabled, but it's still recommended for availability purposes to enable that if you're okay with those security concerns. And then some of the other stuff, like let's go back to that slide. Let's see. Slide goes in here. Here we go. Right, so sizing the delivery controllers is something that we don't always have power, or we do not have power over. That's why we just can make the recommendation to fix it to one socket. Enabling advanced health check, that is something we are going to add as a default. And I'm reviewing this just for my own sake as well, to see if there's anything that we can improve on. But yeah, all the brokers being listed, that's a configuration. We don't have information about your STAs until you input them there. And then the monitoring of the load balancing solution. We support a lot of different load balancing solutions. So this comes from the load balancing side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think the one thing that we definitely can have as a default would be the advanced health checks.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I will just add to what Isaac is saying. I mean, so by default, LHC is configured. So by default, if there's a disruption, LHC will get triggered and it will try to kind of make sure your end users are not impacted. So that's definitely a default setting, both in CUID on-prem and as. The only thing that we are asking you is make sure that you've taken care of some of these considerations, like you have sized your environment right, you have not, over deployed the number of VDAs that you should have in a specific zone or resource location, and you have good things like advanced health check and settings on the NetScaler set up so that when LHC does kick in, I mean, there is no disruption at all, and you are configured right for LHC to work or function well. That's all. I mean, I think our ask is from you on this slide. With LHC, basically, ultimately the uptime is in your hands. I mean, what we are saying is like basically you can guarantee 100% uptime. So even if Citrix Cloud were to go down with LHC, you will have no end user disruption if you have configured it right. Like, I mean, except for a couple of minutes or a few minutes of the switch from primary broker to secondary broker, pretty much there is no disruption. So if you are making sure of these settings, you are guaranteed to have like a really high uptime and high availability. Quite a few questions coming in, Isaac, I think.
Yeah, some great feedback. I like the one, it'd be great to have a tool to do an LHC test, configuration check. We're working on some of the configuration check stuff. We're working on a configuration check that we're going to integrate into our product. But much like CDC, I'm not familiar with CDC. Evan, can you maybe put in the chat what CDC is and maybe what you'd like to see in localhost cache that CDC has?
Yeah, would be lovely to understand that, because definitely that's another area that we're thinking of, like how do we help you to test LHC and check for misconfigurations.
What would happen to Studio? When you use Studio, you're connecting to one of the delivery controllers. And what if the delivery controller you're connected to isn't the one that gets selected? So would Studio stop working, or would it send false data, or would it reconnect?
Studio is generally unavailable if SQL is down.
Yeah,
it would be unresponsive. It wouldn't give a message or anything, or
it does give a message. I forgot exactly what that message says, but they're like when you try to connect to the MMC snap-in, it'll tell you that the site is unavailable.
Okay.
And Ivan replied back and he said CDC is the Citrix data collection tool. Okay, I'm aware of that. I mean, we'll take that feedback, Ivan. Thank you so much for that good feedback.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. From Jim, Nitin and Isaac, you may be able to word it better than me for Matt's statement about removing the local SQL Express from the brokers and the effects to LHC.
We wouldn't expect LHC to work if you remove the SQL Express database from the install.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's installed by default, so we, yeah. Okay, so Matt is saying we remove SQL Express during the install.
So there would be no local cache to run off of.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's where we store the cache. And so if you don't have SQL Express, pretty much we don't have that cache. And so LHC won't be able to take over during disruption.
Matt, that would explain why you're having issues with VDAs re-registering as well.
From Jim, I think he's just commenting, I guess, but he's saying broker outage is a site/zone outage. Randall has an enhancement request. It would be cool to get an email when it goes into LHC mode. cloud status may give us an idea if the Citrix cloud is down. That's a great feedback, Randall, and we are definitely evaluating what we can do. The thing is basically the system that sends an email might also be down, like in Citrix Cloud or Director, they could also be down when there's an outage. So we have to think about like what systems can we use when there's an outage, and so that we can deterministically always send you an email when your environment goes into LHC. But definitely a good feedback. Thank you for confirming what we've been thinking of evaluating as well.
Nitin, there was a question from Sarah saying previously LHC had the potential for becoming corrupt and required being compacted. Is that still required, or is that still a possibility?
No, so if you are on the latest version, if you're on 22, I mean, if you in the case of CVAD on-prem, if you're on 22 or 3 or further, you should not see any corruption at all. I mean, we have not heard of any corruption request from the last 2-3 years. So you should not be concerned about that at all. And even in the DAS world, there should not be an issue. So corruption, database corruption is past. So I would just say that.
Nitin, I think there's a question for the broker side of things. Do you think we'll see a headless or a BSD broker and Cloud Connector in the future? So like server core.
Good question. I don't have a good answer right now. We'll have to come back to you guys on that. But a good question. Yeah. Let's keep that as a I think let's keep that question. There are more questions. Previously, LHC had the potential. Okay, I think that is one. I think Colin is asking, localhost cache engages when the site database is inaccessible for 90 seconds. Citrix talks, but the LHC lifecycle mentions 60-second minimum duration for the pending HA. Is this part of the 90 seconds? Colin, I think it should be 60 seconds. I'll have to check where you saw this 90-second thing. Might be a documentation issue or something that has to be updated. But if you could point me to the documentation, that'll be great. I'll take a look as well. But ideally sorry, go ahead, Isaac.
I was gonna ask Stephanie, we get this whole chat when at the end, right?
Yes, I'm waiting till the last minute because it's so active before I save it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So I'll take a look at that, Colin, but I think it should be 60 seconds as what Isaac was presenting in his slides, and you'll get access to the slides after. We are just 2 minutes out, but any other questions, guys? Any other feedback? I mean, and feel free to reach offline as well to both Isaac and me. I am on the CUGC Slack channel also. If you guys are not signed up, please do sign up there. And yeah, thanks Isaac for sharing the email IDs also.
Yeah, we really appreciate everyone hopping on, being super active in the chat, asking lots of good questions. I think there's a lot of great feedback in terms of the reporting on the events. So that's great feedback for us that we're going to look to improve on, and we appreciate everyone for joining.
Yep. Thanks everyone. Thanks for the time, and hopefully you configure LHC right and it helps you save any outages.
All right, thank you so much. I think you guys got put through your paces today. There was a lot of questions and a lot of chat. That was awesome. All right, well, thanks again. Thank you, Chris, for being with us too. Appreciate you being back there helping with the conversation.
Yeah, no problem. Although Nitin did the most questions.
Thanks for putting it together, Stephanie.
Of course, we'll hope to have you back again soon. Just let me know. We've always got room for you. So, all right, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Hope to see you at another CUGC event soon. And enjoy. Bye.
Thanks everyone. See you guys.
Bye, everyone.